In the early hours of June 2nd, 1942, under a starless sky off the coast of Normandy, a small flotilla of British motor launches sliced through the cold Atlantic waters. Their mission was as daring as it was dangerous. A handful of commandos from No. 10 Inter-Allied Commando were tasked with sabotaging German radar stations that had been giving the Luftwaffe an almost perfect early warning network along the French coast. These radar installations, part of the infamous Freya and Würzburg systems, were capable of detecting aircraft over 100 miles away, a technological edge that could doom any Allied bombing raid. The stakes were simple yet brutal. Failure meant that upcoming operations in occupied Europe could be ambushed from the skies with devastating precision. The journey across the Channel was treacherous. Rough seas tossed the launches like corks, and navigational errors threatened to send men off course into heavily patrolled zones. Lieutenant Robert Colvin, leading the raid, scribbled in his diary, "The sea is our first enemy, and yet it is the one we must conquer before facing the guns ashore." The men were armed with what little they could carry: Sten submachine guns, Lee Enfield rifles, a cache of explosives, and a set of compact demolition charges designed to cripple radar dishes. Each soldier knew the detection would mean almost certain death or capture, and yet there was no turning back. Tension hung over the deck like fog, thick and suffocating. As dawn approached, the launches neared the French coastline. The commandos had intelligence that suggested German patrols had recently intensified around the radar sites near Cap d'Annefer, northeast of Le Havre. Yet, intelligence in wartime was often fragmented or outdated. Some reports indicated that the radar operators had abandoned certain bunkers, while others suggested new reinforcements had arrived. The uncertainty gnawed at the team, forcing them to balance speed with stealth. Even the smallest misstep, a misfired weapon, a creaking hull, or misplaced footstep could alert the Germans and doom the mission. Once ashore, the commandos faced the dunes and cliffs of the Normandy coast, a harsh landscape made even more formidable by wartime defenses. Mines, barbed wire, and camouflaged sentries turned the terrain into a deadly obstacle course. Visibility was low. The fog hung over the land like a ghostly veil. Each step forward was a calculated risk, and every shadow could conceal an enemy patrol. Private James Hawkins, writing to his family in a letter later recovered, described it vividly. "It's like walking through a maze with death on every corner and no map to guide you." Amid these challenges, the human struggle was as pressing as the tactical one. Men battled fear, fatigue, and the cold, all while trying to maintain radio silence and formation. Relationships and trust were tested. The slightest disagreement could be fatal under enemy eyes. Lieutenant Colvin addressed his men with quiet intensity. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Every man here knows what is at stake. We proceed because failure is not an option." That blend of discipline, camaraderie, and sheer grit was what had kept the Special Operations Executive and Commando units alive in countless perilous missions. Even as the first radar bunkers came into view, there remained a lingering mystery. Some appeared deserted, as if abandoned in haste, while others were shrouded by camouflage netting and observation posts. The commandos could not tell whether they were early, too late, or walking into a carefully laid trap. This uncertainty would define the mission in the days to come, an operation where information was scarce, danger was omnipresent, and the line between success and disaster was razor thin. As the team crouched in the dunes, surveying the German positions, the quiet before the storm settled around them, a calm that masked the lethal decisions each man would have to make within the next few hours. In the distance, the first glimmers of dawn streaked the sky with pale orange, illuminating both the promise and peril ahead. Lieutenant Colvin paused, penning one final thought in his diary before the raid began. "We step forward not knowing what awaits, but knowing that history may never record our names, yet our actions will shape the sky itself." With that, the commandos tightened their grip on rifles and explosives, and the mission commenced, an audacious gamble against time, technology, and the ever-watchful eyes of the German radar operators. Under the gray dawn of June 2nd, 1942, the British commandos moved cautiously across the Normandy dunes, their boots sinking into sand damp with morning mist. Every sound, an insect, a distant bird, the scraping of a rock underfoot, felt amplified, a potential alarm to the German sentries they were trying to avoid. The targeted radar installations, part of the Atlantic wall defenses, had been carefully positioned on high ground, overlooking both the coastline and inland approaches. The men knew that one misstep could mean alerting a heavily armed patrol unit, many of whom had orders to shoot on sight. Navigating the terrain proved far more difficult than the maps suggested. Mines lay hidden beneath sand drifts, and barbed wire cut unexpected lines through the dunes. The commandos, trained in stealth but not immune to human error, had to crawl, roll, and sometimes sprint in silence. Lieutenant Cole then led the group, constantly scanning the horizon with binoculars, while Sergeant Mallory coordinated the movement of the explosives. At one point, a miscalculated step set off a small sand trap, sending a loose wire skittering across the ground. Every man froze, hearts pounding, waiting for the response that thankfully never came, though it could have been fatal had a sentry been closer. The human element added layers of complexity to the mission. Fatigue from the crossing, stress of the unknown, and fear of capture pressed down on the men like the dense Normandy fog. Private Hawkins, noting in a smuggled notebook, wrote, "Every hour here feels like a day. We are shadows moving among shadows, and yet our lives cling to the silence." Comrades whispered warnings to each other, shared small words of encouragement, and clutched weapons with white-knuckled hands. The struggle was not only against the enemy, but also against the mind's own doubts, a psychological battlefield as real as the physical one. Despite the difficulties, the commandos pressed forward. They discovered the first radar bunker to be strangely quiet. Some equipment had already been removed or sabotaged, leading the team to question the accuracy of their intelligence. Was this a coincidence, or had another Allied unit acted ahead of them? The lack of clarity created a tense atmosphere. Decisions had to be made with incomplete information, a lesson well known to officers who had studied the unpredictable nature of covert operations. The war was rarely clear-cut, and this mission illustrated the crucial importance of adaptability and improvisation in the field. Tactical insight became paramount. The team had to split into smaller units to approach multiple bunkers simultaneously, increasing both efficiency and risk. Radio communication was limited to prearranged hand signals and subtle gestures to maintain secrecy. Sergeant Mallory, observing a German patrol moving across a ridge, signaled for a halt. The men dropped flat into the sand, the patrol passing just yards away, oblivious. This moment highlighted the constant balance between courage and caution, a lesson echoed across OE and commando missions. The smallest hesitation or misjudgment could cost lives. The struggle also brought fleeting moments of reflection. Soldiers considered the larger strategic picture, the D-Day plans that would unfold 2 years later, the sacrifices of comrades in distant campaigns, and the invisible hand of intelligence guiding every decision. Lieutenant Colvin's voice, calm but firm, reminded them, "We move in the shadows today so that others may move in the light tomorrow." It was a reminder that even the most secretive, small-scale operations had ripple effects in the broader conflict, influencing battles yet to come. As night approached, the commandos reached the perimeter of the primary radar site. Lights flickered in the distance, and the sound of distant boots on concrete sent a shiver through the group. With visibility fading, the team prepared for the next phase, infiltration and sabotage. Some bunkers appeared empty, while others hinted at hidden defenders. A palpable tension lingered. Would they find the installations abandoned, or would the Germans be ready and waiting? The mystery remained unresolved, setting the stage for a confrontation that could either turn the tide or end in disaster. With silent nods and clenched jaws, the commandos braced themselves for the unknown, stepping into the heart of danger. By late evening on June 2, 1942, the British commandos had reached the radar bunkers near Cap d'Annefer, their progress slowed by the treacherous dunes and ever-present fog. The structures loomed ahead, concrete, angular, and fortified, yet eerily silent. Some bunkers appeared stripped of equipment, with radar dishes missing or dismantled, as if the Germans had abandoned them in haste. Conflicting intelligence gnawed at the men. Had prior Allied operations sabotaged these sites, or were they walking into a carefully orchestrated trap? The uncertainty was maddening, the kind that only a war fought in secrecy could create. The commandos had to make rapid decisions. Small teams were dispatched to inspect each bunker, explosives in hand, ready to disable whatever equipment remained. Lieutenant Colvin's group entered a concrete chamber to find fragments of electronics left behind, wires snipped, and sand tracking into control panels. The scene suggested a hurried retreat, yet no evidence confirmed the reason. In a hastily written note later recovered, Colvin remarked, "We are caught between shadows and ghosts, enemy we cannot see, plans we cannot read." It was a reflection on the chaos inherent in special operations. Information is always incomplete, and clarity is often a luxury the battlefield cannot afford. Suspense intensified when the commandos discovered documents partially destroyed but hinting at German communications and intelligence networks tied to the radar stations. The papers contained cryptic codes and personnel logs, raising questions about whether some installations had been evacuated to lure Allied forces into ambushes. This realization underscored the strategic mind games of the war. The Germans had become masters of deception, and even in occupied territory, one could never take silence for granted. Every bunker became a puzzle, every empty room a question mark. The human strain continued to mount. Exhaustion, hunger, and constant vigilance weighed heavily on the men. Their training held firm. Each commando understood that hesitation could cost lives. Private Hawkins later described the feeling in his diary. It is not the bullets or the barbed wire that terrifies, but the knowledge that at any moment, a single wrong choice can erase us from history. Even amid fear, acts of courage surfaced. One soldier risked climbing an exposed observation post to verify enemy positions, gathering critical information that would shape the next stage of the raid. These small acts of bravery highlighted both the individual and collective stakes of mission. The strategic insight of this chapter became evident. Warfare was as much about information as firepower. Deception, reconnaissance, and timing dictated outcomes in ways raw strength never could. Lieutenant Cole then reflected on the principle that would guide his actions for the remainder of the mission. The eyes of the enemy are everywhere, and yet they are blinded by their own assumptions. Knowledge is our only advantage. This wisdom remains timeless, echoing in modern intelligence operations, where understanding and foresight often outweigh sheer force. As night fell, the commandos prepared explosives and coordinated for simultaneous strikes across multiple bunkers. Yet the lingering question persisted. Why had some sites been abandoned while others remained guarded? The mystery deepened the tension, leaving a sense of unease that would carry into the next phase of the operation. The team crouched among the dunes, aware that the coming hours could bring success or catastrophe, their fate intertwined with shadows, silence, and secrets yet unrevealed. Night had fully descended over the Normandy coast on June 2, 1942, and the commandos were poised to carry out the core of their mission, placing explosives to disable the German radar installations. The wind whipped off the channel, carrying the scent of salt and the faint hum of distant patrols. Every movement was measured. Every sound could betray them. The bunkers, now partially illuminated by moonlight, revealed their formidable defenses, sandbagged observation posts, slit windows, and the occasional sentry pacing along the perimeter. The men knew that any miscalculation would not only compromise the raid, but almost certainly result in death or capture. The operation quickly turned chaotic. As the teams began to set demolition charges, a sudden clatter from a nearby ridge startled the men. A German patrol had unexpectedly appeared. Explosives had to be abandoned, and several soldiers were forced to scatter into the dunes. Visibility was low, compounded by the fog and the uneven terrain. Lieutenant Cole then barked orders to regroup, but in the confusion, some commandos vanished into the night. Sergeant Mallory later noted in his field report, "It was a nightmare of shadows. Men moved like ghosts, some never to be seen again." The disappearance of team members underscored the cruel reality of clandestine warfare. Even the best-laid plans could unravel in seconds. The human element of endurance and courage was starkly on display. Fear and adrenaline merged, leaving the men hyper-aware of every step, every whisper, and every shadow. Private Hawkins described his experience. "I ran with my heart in my throat, trusting that each man beside me would survive, though I could not see them." The dunes became a maze, and every whisper of wind a potential death knell. The struggle was not only physical but psychological, as the commandos were forced to act decisively under extreme stress with limited visibility and fractured communication. Despite the setbacks, some explosive charges were successfully planted, and several radar dishes were damaged. The partial success delayed the German early warning capabilities, though it fell short of total mission objectives. Intelligence gathered on site suggested that some installations had been abandoned intentionally, while others might have been reinforced without the commandos' knowledge. The mystery of why some bunkers were empty while others remained operational heightened the tension and illustrated the unpredictability of covert operations. These ambiguities would fuel speculation among Allied intelligence and historians for decades to come. The lesson of this chapter reflected both tactical and strategic realities. Missions in hostile territory are rarely clean or complete. Even well-trained units can suffer losses, miscommunications, and unanticipated resistance. Lieutenant Cole then captured this in a private note. "We measure success not by perfection, but by the lives saved and the enemy delayed. Every sacrifice has its echo in the wider war." It was a stark reminder that the fog of war extended not only over the battlefield but also over the historical record, leaving some events forever shrouded in uncertainty. As the commandos began their withdrawal under the cover of darkness, the unresolved fate of the missing men hung heavily in the air. Some were likely captured, others possibly lost to the dunes or the channel itself. The survivors moved cautiously back toward the rendezvous point, aware that the Germans might have set ambushes along the coast. The night closed around them like a shroud, and the mission, while partially successful, left questions that would linger for decades. Who survived, who disappeared, and why some radar stations were mysteriously abandoned. The shadow of uncertainty carried forward, setting the stage for the desperate search and rescue efforts that would follow in the coming days. The first flight of June 3, 1942, revealed the aftermath of the raid along the Normandy coast. Some commandos had returned to the rendezvous point, weary, wet, and haunted by the chaos of the night, while others remained unaccounted for. Rescue operations were immediately organized, involving both the Royal Navy and local members of the French resistance. Motor launches scoured the coastline, and small teams moved inland through forests and fields, seeking survivors or signs of capture. Yet despite these efforts, several men seemed to have vanished entirely, leaving families and comrades with only speculation and rumors. Reports from recovered documents and intercepted German communications added to the intrigue. Codes and messages hinted at counterintelligence operations linked to the radar stations, suggesting that some missing commandos might have been detained or secretly interrogated by the Germans. The French resistance provided fragmented accounts of men seen being moved under cover of darkness, while others recounted sightings of mysterious naval launches in secluded coves. Lieutenant Cole then noted in his field journal, "Some men walk into shadows from which they may never return, and those who remain are left only with questions and fragments of stories." The uncertainty underscored a grim truth about clandestine operations. Success often comes at the cost of unanswered questions and incomplete narratives. Meanwhile, the partial success of the mission had strategic implications. Several radar dishes were destroyed, temporarily blinding German detection along a key stretch of coastline. Allied planners analyzed the results carefully, noting that the delay in early warning capabilities would provide valuable intelligence for future operations. The raid, though costly, demonstrated the impact a small, well-trained force could have on the broader war effort. Military analysts later reflected that these small victories were crucial in shaping the tactical conditions that eventually made the Normandy landings in 1944 possible. The human dimension remains central to the story. Survivors carry the burden of loss, guilt, and the ever-present fear that more comrades have been captured or killed. Letters smuggled back to families spoke of bravery, uncertainty, and the strange camaraderie forged under extreme conditions. Private Hawkins, recovered after a daring extraction, wrote, "We know not all of us will return, yet we act as if tomorrow will come. It is courage born of necessity, and perhaps madness." The balance between human resilience and vulnerability was stark, reminding all involved that behind every tactical success lay personal sacrifice. The lingering mystery of the missing men haunted both Allied forces and historians. Decades later, efforts to trace their fates yielded only fragments, partial eyewitness accounts, intercepted German communications, and scattered field reports. Questions persisted. Were the missing soldiers taken prisoner? Did they attempt independent escapes? Or were they quietly extracted for reasons never recorded in official archives? This ambiguity has ensured that the raid remains not only a tale of daring and strategy, but also a story marked by human loss and unresolved disappearances. As the day drew to a close, the surviving commandos regrouped on the coastline, their mission technically a partial success but shadowed by unanswered questions. The operation had delayed German radar coverage and inflicted damage on key installations, yet the fates of some men remained a haunting enigma. For the Allies, the raid offered both tactical lessons and sobering reminders. Intelligence must be verified, plans must anticipate uncertainty, and even the bravest soldiers may vanish without a trace. The mystery hung like a fog over the channel, leaving an unresolved tension that would carry forward into the final chapter, where history, strategy, and human courage converge. By the end of June 3, 1942, the full picture of the secret raid on the Normandy radar stations began to emerge, though many details remained shrouded in uncertainty. The partial success of the operation had delayed German early warning capabilities, providing a small but crucial window of opportunity for future Allied air and naval operations. Yet, the disappearance of several commandos continued to haunt both their comrades and the planners in London. Who had survived? Who had been captured? And why had some bunkers been abandoned while others remained operational? These questions would linger for decades, a testament to the opaque and perilous nature of wartime intelligence operations. Historians later pieced together fragments from diaries, naval logs, and intercepted German communications. Some missing men were confirmed to have been captured and sent to prisoner of war camps, while others simply vanished, their fates lost in the chaotic aftermath of the raid. The intelligence gathered from abandoned and sabotaged radar stations provided critical insights into German defense networks, reinforcing the importance of reconnaissance, timing, and deception. Lieutenant Colvin's final report reflected this duality. We struck shadows, in the process learned their form, yet some shadows remain, resisting capture or understanding. The raid exemplified the delicate balance between tactical achievement and the personal costs of clandestine warfare. The broader impact of the operation became evident in later planning for the Normandy landings of 1944. By disrupting German radar coverage, the commandos helped to create a window for Allied aircraft and naval forces to operate with reduced risk of early detection. Though only a small part of the larger war effort, their actions illustrated how precise, courageous interventions could influence the outcomes of much larger campaigns. Modern military strategists continue to study these raids as examples of how intelligence, daring, and adaptability can offset numerical or technological disadvantages. The human cost, however, could not be understated. Letters and diary entries left behind by the commandos reveal the intense psychological strain endured during and after the raid. Fear, loss, and uncertainty weighed as heavily as physical exhaustion. The unresolved disappearances serve as a reminder of the shadowy world these soldiers inhabited, where heroism often came hand in hand with mystery and sacrifice. It is this interplay between valor and the unknown that gives the story its enduring resonance. War is as much about human resilience as it is about tactics and technology. As the sun set on the coastline, the surviving commandos returned to England, their mission partially complete and their minds heavy with unanswered questions. The radar stations were temporarily silenced, German defenses disrupted, and crucial intelligence gathered, but the echoes of the missing soldiers and the abandoned bunkers remained. The story closes not with a clear resolution, but with a lingering shadow of history's unknowns, a reminder that even in victory, war leaves behind mysteries that time may never fully resolve. And so, the secret raid on German radar stations remains a tale of bravery, strategy, and enduring enigma, a chapter in history where courage met uncertainty, and where some questions continue to haunt the past.